Behind every mission, every movement, and every attempt to create change, there's a human story shaping how it all unfolds. I'm Dr. Payal Beri, and this is Reframing Perspectives. This podcast is for those change makers, those purpose led founders, nonprofit leaders, growth mindset individuals, and purpose driven entrepreneurs who believe the work that they're doing in the world should actually make people's lives better. Each week, I'm sitting down with change makers who are shaping impact in their industries and communities. And together, we're going to explore the moments, the questions, and the perspective shifts that changed how they lead, how they build relationships, and how they create meaningful change in our world. Welcome to Reframing Perspectives, the podcast for change makers who believe relationships are the real infrastructure of impact. Welcome, Dan. So excited to have you on Reframing Perspectives. Your story, your way that you've built, a really transformational experience in New York and what you're doing is, I think every change maker needs to hear about it because I think that it's very easy as a change maker to get wrapped into this idea that it has to be done in a specific way. And only if I belong to a certain community that can I do something for them or whatever challenges or rules that they have put in place for them. So I'm really excited to dive in with you about how you're really transforming community, relationships, trust, and the way that that is transforming the ways that communities are being supported across the boroughs in New York.
Sounds good.
I want to start with actually going way back. And, I think one of the challenges that sometimes change makers can also have is that there's this idea that I have had to have started my career in nonprofit, or I would have had to have started my career doing social work or doing some social impact. And that's where I should have started everything. But I think that there are enough people in the world that just care deeply about doing good work and doing social good, but they have stories where it started somewhere else, similar to you, where you started doing sales in startup world and
Yeah.
completely opposite, but your heart was always focused on wanting to do good work. But I think that what is really important is that even though you were doing sales in startup world, there's skill sets that you developed by being in that
Uh,
world that can be so influential in the world that you're in today. So I want you to just kind of take us back to that moment of what it was like to be in that world of startup and sales and, the skills that you were able to develop that have helped you in doing the work that you're doing today.
sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on today. It's fun to be here and share about the journey. I think that in a lot of ways, I mean, I'm still in sales. Only now I sell good karma. Um,
Well,
my mom early on, she said that life is kind of like one big cold call, and I feel like I've kind of taken that with me. I think that having practice with speaking to all kinds of people
hmm,
and hearing their objections and hearing no a lot is a really helpful experience for basically anything that requires any kind of persuasion. And
yeah.
so I think in that way, yeah, I think that I also sold Cutco knives when I was in college. I think that also just the idea of like having to call strangers and and also have a theater background. I mean, there's a lot of different things that really came together. But yeah, I think that everyone should have to have a trial by fire on some outbound sales on the phone because it definitely teaches a lot of character and a lot of other just character and resilience and
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like, especially with the challenges that are continuous in the social impact world, and when you are filled with wanting to do social good and doing good for the world, but it's amazing how many obstacles are in place to allow good things to just happen. And so I'm curious how you've been able to use that, like as you mentioned, right? Like hearing all the no's, getting used to the rejections, getting over and building that resilience. But when you have those skill sets that you have built somewhere else and bring them into the space, what was something that would you say would be like a shock? Was something that was like, whoa, I wouldn't have realized that it would be this hard to do good work.
well, I think that one thing I didn't anticipate is sort of all of the sort of mistrust that
Mm.
can come from outsiders, and I think that is a very normal and at the time, I didn't know what to expect, but in retrospect, learning, and just to give you some background, what I mean is that I was a teacher in the Bronx. That's kind of the way that,
Right.
that I got started, but I didn't live in the South Bronx, and I wasn't kind of from the immediate community that I was serving, and there was a lot of gratitude for sure, but then there was also some resistance, and I think that resistance was something that was not immediately expected and something that I had to learn about how to encounter and how to work with.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. I actually definitely wanted to get to that. And it's interesting because I can actually relate to this. So I was a former clinical therapist and I did home-based counseling and therapy in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, and in Queens. And so, but I'm not from any of those areas. I grew up in California. I moved out there, and it really was something where I'm going into these communities to help support them, going into their homes. And here I am having to now help them navigate into, creating a little bit more less chaos and a little bit more of, how they can use their resources, all those things as a therapist. But I wasn't from there. And there was that same thing that you're talking about of one was I was told that because I'm not from there and I stick out like a sore thumb, that I would actually not be harmed because they would know that I am coming in because I'm there to help. Unlike someone else who could be mistaken for being from the community. And then the other part was that you're not from this community, you're not from this socioeconomic class and group. And so because of that, how dare you come in and there's this feeling of don't pity us. Don't come here and be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I'm going to come and serve and help." And which was obviously there was none of that going through my mind, but clearly that was something of that again, there's a deep protection of that communities that live there and
Yep.
that they have for each other. So how did you did talk about like you were a teacher at the South Bronx, you left
Mhm.
the startup world, you moved to Costa Rica, you come back, you're doing all this work and you're there, you're working and it's during COVID time and you're reaching out to the families, you built trust with them. How did you break the barrier of being the outsider who's coming in and who genuinely wants to support them? How were you able to help them see that you're there for good?
Sure. I think that a lot of it has to do with centering dignity and centering connection. And also with going out of I went out of my way to meet the people and engage in genuine conversation with the people who were kind of the influencers. And so, I mean, this work started with a a um a pickup truck that came to a corner on a South Bronx sidewalk and dropped off a refrigerator. It's kind of we started in community fridge work, and that day this guy Chino who if you don't know him, he can be a little bit of an off-putting character. He has a teardrop tattoo and I just wasn't sure what to expect when he approached me, but he came up and he said, "What is this?" And I said, "Oh, it's a fridge for the community." And he said, "Oh, that sounds good. I'm into that or something. I got your back." And ever since then, actually, Chino and I have been close friends, and I've gotten to know him, and he is you might call him like the mayor of the block. And I think it's just really important in this work to get to know all of the quote unquote mayors of the block and to understand who they are and what matters to them and to make sure that they're centered in the process and really like yeah I helped plant the seed of that refrigerator being there, but it's really while it was there. Now we've actually taken it away because we pivoted to a different kind of approach in that
Mhm.
neighborhood. But while it was there, I know that Chino really had ownership over it being his fridge, and I think that's really important.
So, what I'm really hearing is about centering the community itself and not necessarily that this is my mission that I have for the community. It's about
Correct.
centering the community itself that
Well, it's not
this is
doing
their
it right. It's not bringing a solution to the community or doing something to the community. It's doing something with in
right.
partnership with the community.
Yeah. Yeah. That I would say is that one challenge that definitely an outsider can have for coming in when they have this grandiose idea about how they wanna create change or they wanna create impact, and they design this whole thing without ever having asked the community, what do they want? What do they need? So would you say that working with him became the catalyst to, Grassroots Grocery?
Well, I would say that I mean, working with him and other people like him are vital. I mean, so the way that our model works is we have a whole group of community leaders, and we call them grassroots grocers in our grassroots grocery network. And these community leader partners are the ones who receive food and then who give it out to their own communities. And so Chino is now he no longer helps take care of a fridge. Instead, he's a grassroots grocer. And we have 30 plus other grassroots grocers throughout Harlem, Upper Manhattan, and the Bronx. And the model is a really deep belief that it's these grassroots grocers who are super centered in their own community, who are very well aware of the needs of their fellow neighbors, that these grassroots grocers are the ones who will know what to do with the delivery of food once they receive it. And so they're the ones who give out the food directly to their neighbors. It's not like we're rolling up and handing out food on the sidewalk. We always do it through the intermediary of a grassroots grocer. And that's his table stakes for us because this is in order to reach a community, you have to work with the centerpieces within that community. And so that's going to be something, even as we scale, that'll always be a foundational piece of our model.
How do you win them over?
Mm.
When you realize that these grocers are truly anchor and pivotal to getting groceries out to helping to eradicate food inequity, which I know you mentioned it's like this is generational work. So it's not something where it's like, oh, this is going to happen right in our lifetime, but it's recognizing that when we set the roots right there at home with them, how do you help them as especially specifically as you grow into other neighborhoods and other communities? How do you anchor, these grocers to let them see that this has been working and this is, the long run?
I mean, I think part of it is consistency. I think that there are um, a lot of interventions that are temporary and that come and go. And I think that that's also where some of this mistrust come from is that I think that it's very common for communities, especially disadvantaged communities, to have like some kind of really charismatic person come in and say, hey, I'm going to make all these changes. And then, after the election's over or whatever, after, it's a flash in the pan. And I think that what we've proven is that we can provide access to fresh produce every week. And the grassroots grocer gets to opt in or opt out, but it's up to them. If they want to give out produce every single week, then they can. And so I think that just providing that consistency is one really important element. And I think the other is that we might provide suggestions on how best to give out the food. And we might have some minimal requirements that you should wear gloves when the food is distributed or some kind of hygiene things. But we really place it in the hands and heart of our grassroots grocer um, to make all of the decisions about how they, as long as they're giving it out on the same day, some of these safety concerns. But we have some folks who hang up food on the doorknobs of folks that are elderly and homebound. And
Mhm.
we have others who do a client choice kind of style. Client choice just kind of means like a farmer's market type style where they set up all the different kinds of produce and people from the community come up and get a bag and fill it. And they're all different kinds of ways that that's done. We don't have any requirements from for example, we don't ask for IDs. We don't ask for any kind of identifying information that might make people feel scared. And then I think also it's in a community setting. And so our motto from the beginning has always been to bring the pantry to the people.
Mhm.
And I just think that vibe of, for example, I send my kids to a community center. And so when I'm picking my kids up from the community center, I can get food there. Or I
Mhm.
live in a New York City Housing Authority development. And so I can just walk downstairs to the community room and get food there. That's centering, that's like physically centering the community that folks are living in. So we're centering it physically. We're centering it with a real trust in the leaders in the community, and we're also centering it by placing that community leader at the forefront as the one who gets to make all the decisions and who gets to really run the show.
That's really incredible because what I'm really hearing is about, again, there's so much empathy built in to everything from the distribution to the empowerment of the grocers to the community seeing this not as another obstacle for them to be able to get food, to be able to get the groceries that they need to feed their families, but it's really looking at it as every grocer gets to decide in our community, these locations tend to be the places where everyone goes to. So I'm going to center that as the marketplace where people can
Mhm.
come grab food, or we know that this community, there's a high demographic of elderly. So they're going to have a harder time to go commute. So we're going to be focusing more on delivering to them. So it's like they know their community's DNA so well
Correct.
that they're able to really design a way for the community to participate without it seeming like there's now multiple layers. Because one of the things that these groups typically have is that there are so many, whenever they're trying to get any like government support, there's like all these policies and bureaucratic BS that comes in the way of,
Yeah.
well, now you to show ID, but then if you have to show ID, you have to show this, but then if you have to show this, you have to show that. And then they can't actually benefit from the things that are available to them. And then there's fear that's there, like you've mentioned, and there's mistrust that, like, well, especially now that if I show my ID, what's that going to
Yeah.
do to me and my
Well,
family?
and I think that a lot of this is really kind of, I think many prevailing systems are top down in their approach
Right.
and they're rules based. And it's like you can only
And
come.
theoretical.
Well, that's true too. Yeah, they're based on like a theoretical construct of the way that things should be, and we try to stay away from that as well because we care a lot about actually just doing the work. But I think that it's also about, like, oh, you have to be, and even in our volunteering, it's similar where you have to be a certain age to volunteer. You have to have taken this orientation class. You have to have filled out XYZ forms, whether it's for volunteering or for getting food. There are just a lot of kind of, or you have to show your ID, or you have
Right. There
to,
are a lot of protocols.
yeah, there's a lot of protocol, and I think that our real shift is from rules based to relationship driven. And if you center relationships, then guidelines might come out of that. But you're not starting from this place of like dictating rules that you think might be good because of whatever theoretical framework is in your head, that was kind of created out of the reality of the situations.
Yeah, no, that relationship based, I mean, that's everything I believe in. I have a whole thing on a series on the relationship economy and how that is truly the infrastructure of any impact that you're trying to make in community. And so, when you think about that, so with, I want to actually zoom out for a moment because I know we went right into it, but I want to zoom out for a moment and talk about that when this concept came to you about, grassroots grocery, and you were like, okay, how do we make food more accessible to people, especially because of what you experienced being a school teacher during COVID, seeing these families skipping meals, taking breaks, and you're coming up with this, and then you coming up with the model of having these super grocers that are really the anchor in the community. And now you have this very large volunteer base that's also there to support this.
Thousands, yeah.
Thousands of, so walk me through everything from first of all, how do you get access to the food that then gets distributed? Second is, how do you continue to engage everyone to be able to consistently show up on the weekend and come and say, like, all right, here we go. Every food's gonna be delivered on Sundays, or the volunteers that keep coming back. What is that design? How did that really blossom into what it is today?
Sure. Yeah. So in terms of the I guess there are two different streams here. I think one is just how we get access to food. And that cuts across two different programs that we run. And so I'll talk briefly about both of them. So one is this produce party program that we run. And I think at the heart of all of this, by the way, is shared, meaningful, community based service experiences that's really the fiber that connects both of these programs, and it's through these experiences that we're bringing dignified access to food to the community, but it's really by centering neighbors helping neighbors, for lack of a better term.
And it's really that simple. It's neighbors helping neighbors, and I think I'm sorry to cut you off, but it was just that when I read that and I saw that, I was like, "Yeah, that's literally the most simplification of if we wanna live in a collective society where everyone leans in, that's what really we're looking at."
Yeah, definitely my favorite phrase for sure. Neighbors helping
Yeah.
neighbors. And so we run 2 programs. We run the produce party, which is something that happens every Saturday morning. And the way that well, I'll tell you what happens first. So we meet in a shopping center parking lot in the Northeast Bronx that's donated to us generously by a company called Urban Edge. And Urban Edge lends us that space for free. And we throw a party there. And what the party looks like is every Saturday morning, we have folks of all ages, around 200 people, show up, and they greet a truck that's filled with about 10 to 15,000 pounds of produce that would have otherwise that produce that's donated from wholesale produce vendors. And we work with some amazing produce vendors who are really, a lot of them are family businesses, and they care a lot about bringing healthy food into the community, and they don't want anything to go to waste, and so they donate it to us when, for example, the food might no longer be able to last on the shelf, but it's still perfectly good in for the household. And that's the thing. If you're a retailer, you have to take into account like the 7 days that food is going to sit on the shelf. And so we don't have that problem because we take the food and we give it out directly. And so we're able to cut out that shelf life time. And so anyway, we rescue the food from our wholesale vendors. And then as a whole community, kids and their parents and their grandparents and their scout troops and their sports teams and their school communities and their religious communities and their civic associations. And sometimes people throw birthday parties and anniversary parties and bar mitzvahs and whatever.
Right.
Um, they unload this truck with music blasting, and we pack and we sort the produce, and we discard anything that's no longer edible. And then we mix up the produce onto different pallets, and each pallet then represents a community that will receive food. And so in our parking lot, we have like 30 plus pallets that are all filled with maybe 7 different kinds of varieties of produce. And the volunteers are the ones that are arranging all these pallets. So they're making sure that every pallet has the right amount of produce
So give an
of each.
example of a palette.
So a pallet might have, it's all like wholesale boxes. And so it might have and romaine lettuce and berries and peaches. It's usually a mix of fruits and vegetables.
Mhm.
And it's usually about 7 different kinds of varieties of really healthy fruits and vegetables. And so our volunteer community mixes up all that produce and makes sure that there's a good variety on each pallet. And then we drive out hunger, which is where people in their own vehicles, they come to this parking lot. And sometimes it's the same folks that have been packing and sorting. Sometimes it's folks that are only delivering. You can choose to do either or both. And we load up the food into people's cars. Those folks have already been matched the day before using our technology platform with our grassroots grocers. And our grassroots grocers already know the night before how many deliveries they're getting and the name of the person that they're receiving a delivery from. And yeah, and using that approach, it's kind of this parking lot acts as like a distribution hub, and we can get 10 to 15,000 pounds of produce to 25 to 30 different Bronx, Harlem, and Upper Manhattan communities, where these grassroots grocers are then receiving the produce from our volunteers, our volunteer drivers. And then from there, our grassroots grocers are fully in charge. That they
Wild.
meet the car, they take out the produce, they figure out, are we gonna, do a client choice distribution? Are we gonna hang it up on the doorknobs of elderly people? Are we going to do a combination of both? And so they figure that out. So that's the produce party, and that's really by creating creating really robust relationships with wholesale partners. We work now with Baldor, we work with Fresh Direct, and we work with so many of the amazing vendors in the Hunts Point produce market with Dorigo and Katzman and Armada and so many different so
Yeah.
and yeah, and I think that we're providing value to them too because they like I said, they want to get this food into the community. They don't want it to go to waste, but they know that sometimes their retail partners can't take it because, it just doesn't have enough shelf life left. So we can take it. And so that's the way that that works. And then the other program that we do is a program that we do during the week called the Great Sandwich Race. And
I
that's been a
saw that.
really, really fun, really high energy program where we transform conference rooms into really impact hubs. And it's a team building activity where we bring everything to the office and we make thousands of sandwiches in a team based game show style competition. And I just did one yesterday at IBM, for example. And then the sandwiches get brought out to different community sites throughout the city. So we work with homeless shelters and senior centers and transitional housing and low income housing and all those other good community sites that are really reaching our most vulnerable neighbors. Last year, we did we transformed I think 77 different office spaces into hubs of impact, resulting in 150,000 sun butter and jelly sandwiches. And so that's the other, and the way that we actually purchased the food for that program, but we're able to do that because all of our corporate partners make a very generous contribution to our work to have this kind of team building experience with their employees and to do good at the same time. And so they provide a generous contribution, and we take care of all of the food purchasing and setting up the room and just all of the before, the during, and after of the whole event. It's like a very kind of white glove volunteering experience, and it's also really fun and meaningful. And so you know a lot of employees leave the Great Sandwich Race saying that it's one of the best events that they've done all year because they got to let their hair down. Well, I guess they're in a hairnet, but they they um they get to just do something that's a little bit out of their norm for being in an office building, and they get to really bond with their coworkers, and then they also feel a connection to the broader community outside, and they get to see that impact because they see this huge mound of sandwiches that they literally made. Um, and then I think that that's a great segue into your other question about volunteerism and how that works. And I think that a lot of it is again about centering the person, um, and moving from rules based to relationship based. Um, and so I think a lot of volunteering programs. I think there's a couple things um, going on. I think that one is this idea that service is kind of a nice to have, but that it's not necessarily, a lot of organizations, like if they didn't have volunteers, they could probably still do what they do. For us, service is literally essential. We could not have a produce party without our volunteers in the parking lot moving food into the community. We could not have a great sandwich race without the people at the company making the sandwiches. It would be impossible. So I think we're moving from this model of like service being additive to service really being essential. And then I think the other is that a lot of organizations, they have a lot of rules. It's like you have to be this age to come. You have to have taken this series of orientation courses. You have to have filled
Right.
out these forms. And we are very much just like, come as you are. If you want to bring
Yeah.
your baby, bring your baby. If you want to host a birthday party, and bring all your friends, then we'll make that happen for you.
Yeah.
And in that is also really listening to our volunteers why, and some volunteers we've learned come because they want an early morning workout. They love unloading the truck box by box, and that's something that really gives them a lot of joy in the morning. And so we want to make sure that the activities that we're centering for them are activities that help them do more of that. We have other volunteers who we've learned come because they want to really have quality family time. And it's something that they can do with their whole family, like their youngest to their oldest, right? Like we have one family that where it was the younger sister, the older brother, both parents and both grandparents, and they came.
Wow.
Now he's in college, but the one I'm thinking of, but they came every week, and it was that idea of building quality family time, and so we want to create roles at the produce party that really allow families to come together. And I think that it's also this idea of just volunteering in community. I think that's probably the most important is that everyone who comes is immediately welcomed into our community.
Yeah.
And it's really from the beginning a community celebration, and it's a diverse community. I think that it's really hard these days to find that. We have people of all walks of life and all income levels and all races and religions, and whatever other kind of different identity lines there are in the world, and we're all together, bagging the same okra, and it's a great vision of the world. And so I think that people really come to be a part of that vision, and to be, yeah, it's like you want to be a part of a really awesome, welcoming, generous neighborhood, then come to the produce party. It's one of the best neighborhoods that you'll find. I think that people show up there, and they practice being good neighbors, and they practice teaching their kids how to be good neighbors, and then they make deliveries to our community partners, our grassroots grocers, who are doing the same thing in their own communities, giving
Yeah.
out produce in a really community centered way. So yeah.
I mean, I can see you light up so much when you talk about this, and I can actually feel the energy of the produce party and the energy that you have at these every weekend happening just through the way that you're talking about it. And I really feel I can't wait till the next time I'm in New York to definitely
Yeah, you got to
participate
come
in that.
through.
Absolutely. What is really striking to me and that I just really have to touch on is that you mentioned about how the people that are coming to these produce parties are hosting their anniversary party, their birthdays, the bar mitzvahs, all of these things. You have multi generations of families coming in and supporting and volunteering and being there. What would you say is because you're having an impact into these communities that need the food, but what would you say is the emotional impact and the awareness impact that you're having on the volunteers? Because I think it goes both ways. And again, I can't help
Yeah.
but see the empathy in everything you've built in. It's like empathy is woven in so much because my whole stance on empathy and just having done my research on it is that, I firmly believe it's like empathy can be so abstract. So it's hard for people to always understand the impact of a group or what's happening in a society because they have lived a completely wildly different life and they don't have access to that and they don't know it besides what they get on media. But what you've done is that you've created this like uniform, like pipeline and this funnel of of individuals who are coming in who are, probably from privileged backgrounds who are coming in that have that access of time and availability and who
Yeah.
may not, but they're all coming in together to be here, to volunteer, to do this work. And it's giving them insight into
Right.
how this is changing the dynamic of a community centered, relationship centered, community centered, transforming a whole community and kids that get to benefit from this. So what would you
Yeah. That's my
say
favorite part
is
is the kids.
yeah, and that's what I'm so curious about is like those kids that are coming in to do this work, who are coming in for birthday parties, bar mitzvahs, who are choosing to have their bar mitzvah here instead of a big
Well, their
lavish
mitzvah project
party.
at least. No, I think they usually
Well,
still have the big
whatever
party,
it
but
may
but
be,
they
but
they do their project with
there
us.
is
Yeah.
an element of, there's not everyone necessarily needs to do this, right? Or cares to do that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, for sure.
they have chosen to do. So what would you say is the impact that you're seeing in them developing empathy and them developing more of that relationship centered way of existing in world
Yeah.
in their life because of the work that the volunteering they get to do?
I think it's about showing up and being able to practice the values that you care about. And Grassroots Grocery creates that space. So whether it's in a corporate conference room, and it's people, learning how to work together to make the most sun butter and jelly sandwiches in a certain amount of time, or whether it's people in a shopping center parking lot, coming together to bag produce. And you see so many positive indicators, I guess, of humanity when you go there. You see strangers introducing themselves to each other, and you see um, people helping one another. And so I think that it's by creating that space where it's kind of like a playground for kindness.
Totally.
And I think that, just something that people crave. I think people want community. They want community in a genuine way. People want to feel useful. So if we can make something that's super fun, that's high energy, that speaks to their deepest values, and that, yeah, I think it creates a platform for transformation. I think that's kind of that's another piece of it is that I think that you're right that the volunteers are very much also a beneficiary of our work. And that all I mean, the other thing to say is that our grassroots groceries are also volunteers. Um and
Right.
so everyone's a volunteer. Um and that's a cornerstone foundational piece of our work because it provides a platform for transformation. And I think that a lot of the time this work might be looked at as I think there's two things going on. One is that this work might be looked at as like transactional, or like, all right, I'm going to come and do this thing and then it'll be over. Versus we're really trying to create a a pervasive, long-standing community, that we hope can transform everyone in it, to become better people and better neighbors. And so I think that that's the first thing. And I think that the other thing is that often, especially in this nonprofit world, I think that people can be very kind of like duty based, where it's
Yeah.
like, I'm going to do it because I feel bad about, um, whatever, just 'cause I have that responsibility. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that if some people are coming to Grassroots Grocery because they feel a responsibility to do good to the world, I mean, that's amazing. I hope that a lot of people feel that way, but I also know that a lot of people come to practice joy and to be in an incredible community together. And so I think it's just this idea of like, of really as opposed to centering duty and responsibility to centering,
Yeah, that's I really appreciate that. I love the it truly is not just a case study or anything. It's a real life example of transformation for everyone involved with it. Do you have an example of someone who possibly had come originally as a, all right, this is a transactional thing. All right, I'm just gonna come here, I'm gonna do this thing. But then by being a part of it, it really transformed them. And the second piece of that is I'm just so curious if there is any stories that you have or just things that you've noticed yourself in individuals that have come volunteer not knowing what this is really about at first and then just showing and be like, okay, let me see what this is about, and it actually debunking the myths about, food inequity, what it means to be part of these communities that are receiving this kind of support and help, and how it's actually transformed the way that they remove biases themselves.
Yeah, I can think of, I mean, I think that that's happening. I can't really speak to whether someone began first as a transactional experience because I don't know. But um, I can definitely, I mean, one of the things that we see happen all the time is is people stepping up into leadership roles. And we create that funnel where there are certain jobs to be done at the produce party, and after you come a certain amount of times, you can take on those jobs, and it's amazing to watch kids step up into these leadership positions. I mean, we have a 13-year-old Nate, who is he comes with his whole family, comes with his younger brother, his mom, and his dad, and he's what we call a pit boss. And a pit boss is the person that helps organize all of the produce into the people's vehicles who come. Each vehicle stops at a different pit, and then the pits load up the food. And so there's a pit boss in every pit. Nate is one of the youngest pit bosses at 13. And it's just amazing how many people comment on Nate being like, wow, this kid's a real leader. And he gets to practice that every time that he comes, and he gets to boss around adults,
I'm
but in
sure
a
he loves that
very
part.
yeah, but in a very fun way. And so I think that that's one example. I think and that's a great one because the whole family comes together, and they really um they've made connections with other families that have been, just helpful, and so I think that because that's the other thing is like with the relationships that you make at the produce party with people who have similar values, like how does that then ripple into your life outside of the produce party? But then another is this kid Jack. So there was Nate Henry. I talked about him. He's one of our pit bosses. Then there's also Jack, and Jack is a senior at in high school, and Jack is part of this group where moms volunteer with their teenage sons. And so one of the service opportunities that they have really doubled down on is Grassroots Grocery, and Jack began his journey at Grassroots by making a lot of deliveries to Rob, Rob is one of our grassroots grocers. He runs a community center, and every Saturday he's giving out produce with the youth in his center helping him, and they give out produce every Saturday. And Rob and Jack connected because one of the things that we love to do is we love to provide consistency of delivery, and so we love when it's the same person delivering many times because then the grassroots grocer gets to build a relationship with the family delivering. Now Jack and Rob have partnered um, on lots of different initiatives that extend beyond the scope of the produce party. And so Jack and Rob have partnered on non-perishable food collection. They've partnered on, I think, a park cleanup near the center. And that's all just because of I mean, first of all, because Jack and Rob are both incredible humans, but also I think that it's thanks to the connection that the produce party made possible and that slow build of relationship over time between two men. I'm a young man and an older man, but between two men who otherwise would have never had an opportunity to connect.
Right.
And I think but so I think that's amazing, right? And I think a lot about like all these kids that are now making deliveries with their families to our grassroots grocers and over time building genuine relationships with them because they're doing it again and again and having real conversation with them and getting to know the community better and I think that there's a lot to that and I wonder what are these kids gonna what does that experience afford them in their attitude toward their empathy, right, as they grow up, right, in having that experience. But then I also think that even for folks who don't make a delivery, if they're just in the produce party or if they're in their conference room making sandwiches and they are helping and whether it's like helping a kid lift a box or teaching your neighboring person how to do something. I think it's those little acts of kindness that are also over time really transformational and that can really connect people to one another and to the world around them. So I think it's I think that like the really kind of sexy thing is like connecting people together from different communities, but I don't want to discount what can happen just in the community spaces that we're creating at the produce party or at the great sandwich race because those you just see so many good parts of humanity shine through there. And I think that exposure to that kind of thing is what this world needs more of.
100%. I mean, I love those stories. Thank you so much for sharing that because it really is highlighting. So, my company, RK Empathy, my mission is helping and empowering people, leaders, communities to realize that we have way more in common with each other than
Hmm.
otherwise led to believe by those who benefit from our divide. And what you have literally created and done through every initiative, through the different modalities of getting involved, whether it's the sandwich competitions, whether it's produce, whether it's the fact that you have these pit bosses. I mean, first of all, even just the names of
Yeah.
everyone that they get, right? That identity that they get to hold is like so
We
powerful
like
and
to
so
make it super
beautiful.
fun, yeah.
Right. And that brings in that playfulness of it. But I
We
think
also
that
call everyone who comes to the produce party, we call them produce party animals.
I
So
love
that's
it.
another thing.
Yes.
Um,
And it's making it fun and it's what community is about. And if you think about a lot of these communities, like, they have block parties, they have those dance parties, like this is an essence of them. It's an essence of the culture that we're bringing in. But I love the fact that you are connecting a kid from Scarsdale and a grocer and where they're getting to hear and see each other versus building up perceptions of each
right.
other from sources
That's
besides
the thing.
themselves.
Yeah, and I think that they really view each other if you ask them both, they really view each other as like brothers in this movement of neighbors helping neighbors.
Yeah.
And I
And
think that
that's
that's the
incredible.
most beautiful thing is that it's really it really feels to me like a genuine partnership, not one that's kind of based on like, power, but one that's really a mutually beneficial give and take between two men that are, that were beautifully connected through this work and that are growing with and through each other. So
And I
so
think
yeah.
that that's Dan, like, honestly, kudos to you for what you have created, the vision that you had, and how it's built. Because through what you said, the essence of relationships, community, compassion, neighbor loving neighbors, like building that. I think that what you have done, even though, yes, the target goal is about, providing food accessibility, but in that has been woven with so many threads and layers of what it means to be a good human, a
Mhm.
good community member, a
Yeah,
good, individual that just has the humanity of seeing
and
each
I
other with compassion.
yeah, and the only thing that I would say there is that actually that second piece of it, is to me just as much of the target as the food insecurity piece of it. And I think that over time as we evolve the organization, there's no reason why we can't do a produce party with hygiene supplies or with clothing or with all other different types of goods. And it's still
Absolutely.
there's still groceries, and so it still works with the name Grassroots Grocery. And so I think that piece of it, the community building, neighbors helping neighbors, showing up for one another to build a better humanity and a better world is just as much, if not more central than providing dignified access to food. I mean, they're two sides of the same coin, and I think that the dignified access to food couldn't happen without this community that we're creating, because that's
Absolutely.
where the dignity comes from.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I see them both as
Yeah. Well, Dan, thank you so much for sharing this beautiful vision that has come to life in an incredible way, that you are truly role modeling what it is to be a community member that creates this accessibility of, love and joy and with playfulness and the relationship and how relationship is truly centered when you're doing great work. So thank you so much for
my
being at
pleasure.
Reframing Perspectives and for everything you've done and for what is happening with the work you're doing. And so, all the links are going to be in this as well so people can know where to show up on those Saturdays.
Yeah.
And if they are, if you're a leader at a company and you're like, hey, I've got to do a team development,
Yes, please
building
hit us
thing,
up for
like
sure.
here, and you're based in New York, like here's a place
We're
definitely
actually
to go.
yeah, and we're also probably we don't know the exact timeline, but we'll be expanding the Great Sandwich Race multi-city. So
Amazing.
and the produce party eventually, we think also has that potential. And so anyway, stay tuned for growth and expansion as well.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Hi, friends. I have a favor to ask you. If you're finding meaning and you're really resonating with these episodes, I'd love if you could subscribe, leave a review, or share it with your friends and family. Your words help others discover the stories and perspectives that we're exploring over here. And the more that we grow and the more feedback that we get from you through these reviews, the more we can make sure to create meaningful episodes that you're going to enjoy. You have no idea how much it means to me and how much it means to creating these podcast episodes for you. And I'd appreciate it so much. So, subscribe, follow, leave a review, and share it with your family and friends. Thank you so much.